Majestic Records.
Welcome to the Unspeakable Truth, where we speak nothing but the truth, but we speak it from a place of love. This week, we are so excited to have a conversation with two Milwaukee men who have been putting in the work to bring about change in our community, Biko Baker and Jamaal E. Smith. This week, we will be having a conversation about community policing. We've heard and seen so many horrific stories about black men and women being killed at the hands of the police. So can people in our community trust them? And how do we go about ensuring that the police are there for us and look like us? Fair and equality housing. We will discuss how the lack of financial support reduced the African American community from having the American dream during the 30s and 40s, and how that affects our community till this day. Not only when it comes to ownership within the community, but the quality of education as well. Our community leaders. We recently just lost an important community leader, Nipsey Hussle, who impacted his community and many around the world, as well as Jimmy Banks, who made a name for himself on the soccer field but also came back to help the youth in his community. How can we continue to build youth leaders in the community that deserve to come back and serve the community that once served them?
Welcome to the Unspeakable Truth. I'm your host, Quaco at your feet. Here at the Unspeakable Truth, we're not afraid to speak truth to power. We're not afraid to speak on those topics considered taboo. But most importantly, we want to talk to those communities who feel they've been long thrown overboard and ignored and give them viable solutions. Today, I'm too excited because the Unspeakable Truth, this is what this show is about. I did a survey with some of the listeners, and I said, what are the 5 things that you want us to talk about that's unspeakable truth? They said, we want to talk about racism, we want to talk about community policing, housing discrimination, inequitable school systems, and the plot to kill our leaders. And I was thinking in my mind, who could I get? And I'm going to tell you, when you talk about going 2 for 2, getting your first 2 people, that's what I got. I'm sitting here with Brother Biko Baker, entrepreneur. He's also the founder of Render, soccer coach, doing great things within the community. And with Brother Jamaal Smith, he's the racial justice community engagement manager at YWCA Southeast Wisconsin, and also the host of the Urban Perspective on Blow Radio, Internet Radio. Gentlemen, thanks for coming. Thanks for coming.
Appreciate the invitation.
What we want to do is really just get right into it. So, one of the first things they talked about was racism, but I think that's an overarching thing. But the biggest thing that came up was community policing. And when we look at community policing, the biggest question is, can we trust the police? Specifically when we understand that the police has its roots within that slave patrol. Biko?
I mean, that's a deep question to jump off. And, I've had enough experiences in my life to not all the way trust the police.
Yes, sir.
And certain instances where, some people may call the police. I don't call the police. But I trust my public dollar. And I trust the fact that it's going to a system that I don't all the way agree with. And I feel until we can sort of set up a situation where we have a police force that looks and has our best interests in mind, we need to be wary of the police.
Same question, Brother Smith.
I think when you really look at community policing, you have to also weigh in the fact of how much are the police connected to the community, especially when you have issues like the residency requirements where police are no longer required to live in the city. How much are they really investing? What's your connection there? And then also, how much is the city willing to really invest into policing versus true alternative prevention methods? 46% of the city budget goes to policing, and yet we're seeing that there's still this tension that's existing because it seems as if the efforts are not there to really build community police relations. So when you ask me about trusting, I'm agreeing with Brother Biko. I'm not exactly very trusting with police, but also then there's a need there to ensure that accountability is being enforced, and that has to come from us.
It's this double-edged sword where it's like you want them, but you just want them in the way in which they're supposed to be. You don't want them to be extra. I have a lot of people say, I want to call the police, but I don't know who's going to show up. You talk about situations that happen in your life. What's something that happened within the community where you said, this is what led me to be a little wary of the police?
I mean, just constantly being pulled over, and then, I was...
We call that a silent harassment.
Yeah, it meant silent, but sometimes it doesn't feel like that when your heart is racing.
Yes, sir.
And when it's from 16 to 30 years old and still pop up at 41 years old getting pulled over, it's frustrating. And I was just telling my father, when I deal with the police, I go right to son of an ex-military person, go, yes, sir, no, sir. Because I don't want to give the police my time. I'm going to keep it moving. And I've realized they're profiling, they're doing their job based upon a profile or image they have in their head. I just want to keep it moving because at the end of the day, they want to get back to their kids. I want to get back to my kids too.
So we talk about that though. So let's talk on an even more realer topic with that. Can a black man, a black woman be an officer? Understanding sometimes they say, you know what, I'm too blue for the community, but too black for my brothers and sisters. Can they really operate within that system, or can they be that bridge of healing?
I think they can. I think the issue is there's a concept that I've always lived by, which is skin folk doesn't make us kinfolk.
Okay.
So when you look at some people who, identify as black, does that necessarily mean they have the true intentions of the community in mind? And it goes back to the whole idea of white supremacy being an ideology that anybody can uphold. So when we talk about can black people be in that system or navigate in that system, I absolutely think that they can. It's just a matter of, are they coming in with the mindset of true, authentic community relations, or are you coming in there with the intent of upholding the status quo? That's always the question when you see when you see black people or people of color going into that role.
So when we think about that, the reasons why we have a reason to distrust maybe even people who look like us, we see a lot of shootings of unarmed people. Lately, we've been even seeing an alarming rate of shooting of activists, things of that nature. How does that relate to us being able to bring this community policing into a whole, for us to say, we can't trust you, we can't build a gap, when we have so much evidence currently that makes us afraid?
Right. Mm-hmm. I come at this as an historian, and you look at the MPD and the statewide political system, and what we're seeing is that the police department is just a response to the loss of jobs that take place in the 60s and 70s. So we have an economic interest in maintaining the police department. And I argue that we are smart enough and bright enough to innovate our way out of this hyper prison industrial complex. It's stuck, and we don't have any other model for it. And I know this about a white guy who's maybe 40 years old on the force, been there for 15 or 20 years. He wants to have a more ownership of his humanity than going around chasing brothers in the street. I know he wants more than that, and that's where I'm pushing a lot of my own efforts and thoughts, because I spent so much time on the front line trying to fight and argue, and I haven't seen any of that change. In fact, I've seen it gotten worse the more I've come out here.
So I have a lot of questions that I want to ask, but we go to the streets and we get the people to ask. So we have a question from the streets. Let's hear our question.
As a youth, we are often blamed for many problems, especially by the police. But many of us just want to make a change. How do you suggest for us to go about bringing change and improving the views that people have on youth?
I honestly believe that youth have the ability to create their own movements, right? It's not that they necessarily need to get connected to a particular movement that exists. I mean, if you even look at what happened, opinion notwithstanding of the Parkland shooting, the March for Our Lives was led by young people, right? It was a powerful movement. So they have the intellectual wherewithal to begin their own movements and to begin to be those voices that are necessary to change those perspectives.
So let me ask you with that, because with the Parkland, that was a big thing, because those white students. Mm-hmm. And Parkland, to their credit, they brought in some people from the inner city, because the inner city people was like, we done had these troubles already and we tried to do it. So for that black kid that's saying, we want to be able to do that, but we're not listening, what would you say?
I mean, that's a tough one, because I don't feel like you got to write your own stories, man. Tell your own stories. Until hip-hop is not powerful, I say tell your story through hip-hop and culture, because that's the only way you're going to make a shift, and it's the only way we've ever really made a shift is through storytelling.
Mm-hmm. Storytelling, what can I say? The Unspeakable Truth. We're going to be back with these two powerful gentlemen to continue these segments. The Unspeakable Truth, where we speak nothing but the truth, but we speak it in love.
Hey, have you heard?
Have you heard? Have you heard? Hey, have you heard? Hey, have you heard?
I don't know what I'm supposed to hear.
What's up, Lil Vic? Have you heard? I'm hosting the Running Rebels Epic Gala September 26th.
Welcome back to the Unspeakable Truth. We're here with Biko Baker and Jamaal Smith, just continuing the conversation on these issues that affect our community. I hope you enjoyed what we talked about community policing. We could have talked about that forever, but we're going to move to the next one, and that's on housing and housing discrimination. A book we talked about, The Color of Law. It says, a forgotten history of how our government segregated America. Oftentimes when we talk about the story of reparations, we say we need reparations as it relates to slavery and the legacy of slavery, which is real. But sometimes people forget about that Jim Crow era. Absolutely. And everything that happened and how housing helped with segregation, but how that hurt us economically. Can you speak on that just a bit more?
So when you really think about the Federal Housing Administration and how they were complicit in the whole idea of racial segregation and denying housing to African Americans or other people of color, you have to realize that even through the Montgomery GI Bill and how you had some people who were just not allowed, even though they were fully qualified for housing, who were just not allowed to gain access to housing, right? Which is called the Great Equalizer, right? Because of the equity that can come from housing. So
that was supposed to be people's biggest purchase that they ever make in life.
Right. So when you look at the billions of dollars that the Federal Housing Administration invested into providing loans for homeowners during the 30s and 40s, over 98% of those homes went to people who identified as white. So you're already setting a precedence for establishing who is in, who's going to get this equity, who's going to be able to gain this wealth, and who will realize this American dream that had been established through practices by the government.
You know, it's amazing because we talk about those things, and sometimes, you know, you think about pre-civil rights era and whatnot like that. But even if we just go up to the prime lending, you know, scandal and whatnot like that, how we figured that it was African Americans specifically who was given these outrageous rates of loans and things of that nature, how they hurt the families. How do you think that hurt us in Milwaukee specifically, Biko? And you've been around the nation, so you can speak about more than just Milwaukee.
I mean, Milwaukee is home, so it's the place I want to talk about the most. People outside the city get tired of me talking about Milwaukee, so it's good to be talking about Milwaukee. But I know that in my own family, you know, my family taking these grandmother, rest in peace, took a mortgage on a home that had no value, and I continued to pay it off. You know, and I did the math, and it was double, maybe triple what it was worth. And it's just like, you know, we're taking advantage of the fact that people are poor and just want to survive for their families. And so I think it's a struggle. But I know here in Milwaukee that we had Bronzeville that was torn over because of the highway.
Urban renewal.
Right.
And we never even got really a stake here. And so it's frustrating because you want to talk about reparations. We go back in the past. We only got to go back to the 60s, you know what I mean, to talk about how they've been really hurting our community. So I'm with it.
So think about that, because you said we only have to go back to the 60s because you talk about housing being a great equalizer. Well, you know, as Malcolm X said, education is the passport to the future. So when people were saying, hey, let me invest in school, get my children going together and going good. But can you talk about how housing affects education and schooling?
Absolutely. That's an easy intersection when you talk about property taxes in Milwaukee, right? The state of Wisconsin is heavily reliant on property taxes. So when you have over 60% of the residents in Milwaukee are renters, right? So if I'm relying on property taxes in order to elevate, you know, the school districts and other infrastructural components, if so many people are not homeowners, how much is being invested into our schools, which then alleviates or eradicates the opportunity for them to get the resources necessary in those schools, to get the proper teachers in those schools, to get whatever is necessary in order for those schools to thrive, because we're so heavily reliant on those property taxes. I mean, you just look in 2015 alone, Associated Bank had to pay $200 million for discriminatory lending practices right here in Milwaukee, and as well as other states in this region. That's 4 years ago, right? So you have this happening. People are being denied, and it's still currently. People are being denied those opportunities, which then helps or actually hurts the school districts because we're so reliant on those property taxes.
You know, all the time, you know, when it's come time to vote, and I know you're a big advocate of voting, I'm looking at these communities and they're talking about these referendums. And this school district could get 32 million here, 28 million here. You never see that in the city, but yet you'll see something like the FISA form go up quickly. And nobody's saying on that. I think that's a good thing for the community, but you want to see those things done. How can we allow this to still happen, this injustice in front of our face?
On this, housing and schooling is not the issue that I focus on the most, but I'm passionate about it. But again, I try to approach things like a historian because it's sort of like journalistic. I don't want to mess up. But you know who's got the answer on this and has had it on it for 30 years is Dr. Howard Fuller.
Yeah.
When he was the superintendent at MPS, he advocated raising the tax levy and actually went to war, I guess some type of political war. I was too young to understand it, with John Norquist. And he was thinking about it from a radical perspective. And we saw how after that, the whole schooling system changed. And I think that if we could pull Dr. Fuller in, in a space, and some of y'all work with him better than I do, I just think he got a lot of wisdom there to pull from, because I think he's figured it out 30 years ago.
You know what? And the funny thing about that is you hear a lot of people from around the nation who are experts in education say, you don't know what a resource you have in Dr. Fuller. And it's like, we don't appreciate that the most. I'm thinking about this, and these are my questions too. One of the biggest things I know about is parents who say, you know what, I have a choice then. I can either keep my child in the community and maybe not have the best academics, but they're in a social setting that may be more protective. Or I can maybe send them to an environment where the school setting might have better academic opportunities, but they may be harassed in a different way. Mm-hmm. These are my thoughts, but going with that, I don't want to ask that question. I want to lead this into the question from the streets that the students ask. Can we get that question and see how we follow up on that?
How universally accessible and culturally relevant is the curriculum and instructions in suburban schools?
There are huge debates right now in suburban schools about elevating culturally responsive teaching. In addition to Dr. Howard Fuller, we have Gloria Ladson-Billings, who's just an hour down the street in Madison, who elevated that concept, who could be used, and her ideology could be used. So when we really talk about culturally responsive, there's a difference between culturally competent, culturally responsive. I feel when you say competent, it's as if you reached a certain level, I don't have to go any further. But when you're responsive, that means I'm willing to learn more and more about different cultures. And when you look in suburban schools, the more focus is actually cultural assimilation versus culturally responsive and learning other cultures from the students in your building. So that's going to require for parents, community activists, leaders, people who have those voices to demand that those suburban districts be more culturally responsive and accepting of all cultures in the building.
And I love how you say that, because what we're going to do is we're going to close out this segment. But before we go into our last one, we're not going to just talk about the negative things. People always say it's negative. What we're going to talk about is some shovel-ready interventions, some ideals we can give people that they can do today. So come back with us on the Unspeakable Truth for our last segment, where we talk about the good things going on here and the good things you can do.
Get it.
Get it. Get it.
Give your town a reason to celebrate, because every Goodwill item you bring home brings job training and more to your community. Goodwill. Bring good home.
Hello, I am Katrina Moore of Moore & Moore Accounting. We are a full-service accounting establishment specializing in tax preparation. Year after year, people work hard to earn more and more money. With all of the new tax code changes for 2018, don't stress, let us do the rest. Our service is professional and affordable. Our people are courteous and knowledgeable. For an appointment, call today, 414-213-8199. Moore & Moore Accounting, where you're more than just a number.
Welcome back to the Unspeakable Truth. We're here to continue the conversation with Jamaal Smith and Biko Baker. I hope you're enjoying it. It's very powerful. For the first couple segments, we focus on things that were issues in the community that need to be addressed. But what we want to do is talk in this last segment is about those powerful things that's going on. You often hear that concept that we got to kill that black messiah, that black leader. And when I hear that, I used to get mad, but what it lets me know is that there are leaders in this community. I think about, unfortunately, what happened to Nipsey Hussle. Unfortunate passing of a young brother doing some great things. And when he died, it was a hashtag attached to his life called The Marathon Continues. Once a tribute to his store, his product, what he was doing, but also to just letting us understand this is a race that's not a sprint. We have to continue to go on. Brother Baker, I want to start with you because I know you do so much in our community and you're a humble person, but talk about what you're doing from an individual, from a family and a community standpoint to help our community.
First of all, I looked up to Nipsey, even though he was younger than me. I felt like his motto was going from a dope boy to a real estate mogul in 10 years is powerful. It shows the intelligence of that brother, but also his commitment to the community. And, for the last 3 or 4 years, I've been really involved with soccer. And, I know a lot of people know me as an activist and being out in the community, but it was soccer that was really a vehicle that even got me to education. And so the last 3 or 4, 5 years, I've just been trying to give back and make sure that players lived in the same neighborhoods that I lived in and played the same parks, whether it was basketball or soccer, are getting a shot to play big-time soccer.
Now, we just lost a legend in the soccer community in Milwaukee that many people don't know. Talk about that for a second.
Yeah, Jimmy Banks, who I met when I was 7 years old, who was a legend not only on the soccer field but could hoop in the community. He passed away, and so many of us are trying to honor his legacy and keep the game going.
I think about him, and this was a man that played at the World Cup level, the highest level, and he was from here, but he gave back to the community. So when we talk about leaders, that's what I think about a true leader is. And when I think about you, Jamaal, I think about your show, The Urban Perspective. I know you do it, internet radio and Blow Radio. And what I love about your show is that you talk about these issues like at The Unspeakable Truth, but you're not afraid to bring the young people in to give them a voice. How did you start this show, and why was it important for you to give the youth that voice?
Well, I thought creating another avenue for people to come give their perspective on the issues that were really pertaining to our community was necessary. We were seeing everything that was happening with 1290. And now we see that 860 is pretty much the only focus as far as black radio, even though we have Earl Ingram at 1510. But it was just trying to figure out another way to provide a platform necessary. And being a former high school teacher and just listening to the brilliance of young people for years, even working in youth development, it would be a shame if I didn't have young people to give their perspective, because they're impacted by what we see just as much as adults are.
No doubt.
So it was just being able to provide a platform necessary for them to have their voice, as well as to be able to speak authentically and truthfully to the issues that are really impacting our communities, as well as how can we craft solutions necessary to change them.
Now, one of the things that I find hardest for leaders in the community is that balance between being an activist, being a helper to the community, and keeping home stable. I love to see you brag on your son. You put these things, and I see you active, and it's like, how important is it for you to be in his life, and how is it important for him to be a part of the things that you're doing in the community?
Man, there's nothing like fatherhood for me.
Yes, sir.
Being his dad, right? It's not that he's my son. I enjoy being his dad, because just watching him grow and watch him step into his own, his brilliance, step into his own charisma, it's an honor for me. And I just love being a part of the journey, which is why my wife and I, we share the joy of making sure that our son is growing to be the man that we know he's destined to be. We're just giving him the tools to avoid some of the pitfalls, but we just also just allow him to grow. And the way that the manner in which he's going and that he's growing, but we want that for all our young people in our community, not just for our biological kids, right? But the kids in the community are the same
they're all our children.
They're all our children. Yeah. So we got to have that same perspective or that same ideology or the same frame of mind for all of our young people in our communities.
Now, when I started the show, I don't know if y'all knew I'm not saying stuff that's not true. When I said I went 2 for 2, I went 2 for 2. And one of the reasons that got me to you is I read one of your posts on social media. You was like, not like I got the answer to the problems, but if we could do just these couple of things right here, this could help to alleviate some of the problems. I don't want to just put you on the spot like that, but looking at the camera, talking to us, what are some of the things where you said, Milwaukee, if we just do A, B, C, and D, it ain't that difficult. This could give us a jump start into where we want to be.
I give the one that we're late on is the marijuana thing. I mean, all over the country, the economies are sparking, and places like Oakland are actually not only expunging the records of formerly incarcerated people, but getting a shot in the economy. And I mean, who else needs a shot in the economy? Let's try it. I mean, you talked about the tax base. Let's try it. Like, why not? I mean, we got brothers out here that already have that skill set. Let's figure it out. And it's unfortunate that it's taking us so long to get there, but we still, every day we got a new opportunity. It looks like Brother Evers might have the courage to do it, but I'm praying that we figure it out.
So when we think about those things, see, these are the interventions, because as much as you say something positive about it, you're going to have those naysayers to say A, B, or C. Or what I mostly fear is that those who will profit the most will be the people who don't look, and those who are incarcerated for that exact crime will not get those records expunged. In fact, well, they not only get them expunged, they'll still be incarcerated. So how do we ensure that this money, if we do allow this to be legal, goes into helping young men and women to get jobs, helping this money to go back into the school system? How do we make that happen?
I mean, again, it's not an issue that I don't want nobody come knocking my door. It's not an issue that I'm all that passionate about. Other than I feel like brothers
from an economic standpoint.
Yeah, economic, and I feel like we already. I mean, come on, it's opportunity. But the thing is, California, I spent a lot of time in LA. They figured it out. Oakland, they figured it out. They figured out how to increase the tax base. The industry is healthy. People aren't in the streets shooting each other over dime bags of weed. I mean, there's still issues, but those same issues are here for anything that can get you intoxicated. So
listen, we could go on, we could go on. I know you want to go, Jay. I saw you popping on, but we got to go. But man, I'm telling you what, you got an open invite here. Something going on at the soccer field. Let us know, man. We can come profile that at the urban perspective of what you're doing over at the YWCA. We would love to have that come in. But we want to thank you for tuning in to the Unspeakable Truth with Jamaal Smith and Biko Baker. I hope you enjoyed the show. We did. Having it, I know I did. Just listening, I learned a lot. We welcome you to join us next week at the Unspeakable Truth, where we speak nothing but the truth, but we speak it in love.
Bro, is you ready for this party tonight?
Bro, you already know, and Kiki's supposed to slide.
Oh, for sure. Hey, I texted her. Her parents not at the crib. You know I'm sliding.
Alright, bro. Just make sure you protect yourself.
So we didn't use protection after that party, right? So I think we should get tested for HIV or STI.
I mean, I ain't been feeling different. I think I'm straight.
I know, but you ain't gotta have any symptoms to have some.
It's okay to be scared. You don't have to be so strong.
Strength is not optional. This is my mother, my purpose. Real muscle is lifting her spirits between bedpans and bad news from doctors that doubt her strength. Strength is buried in bills, managing meds, and swallowing those moments of, Mom, it's me, your daughter. Remember? My strength is super, but I'm still human, right?
Look who's here. There she is. Hey, thanks for your patience.
How you feel?
If you're caring for a loved one, visit aarp.org/caregiving for care guides and community, or call 1-877-333-5885.
I hope you enjoyed our show today on The Unspeakable Truth with our guests Biko Baker and Jamaal Lee Smith. Sometimes it's hard to hear some of these topics in conversation, but it's also good not just to hear the problems and the issues, but to hear shovel-ready interventions by people who are actually doing those things. So it lets us know that there is hope. We'd like to thank you for joining us on The Unspeakable Truth. I'm your host, Kwaku Atchafee, and remember, here at The Unspeakable Truth, we say nothing but the truth, but we speak it in love.
Majesty Records.